What's going on social media? So this month makes 509 years that Juan Ponce de Leon came and visited Miami, where he then called it Chequesca. I have some more information for you, regardless of whether you are buying, selling, or renting property down here in South Florida, about the property insurance market here in Florida, about the hurricane season that's coming up. We're in the middle of hurricane season now, kind of the beginning of hurricane season now, but I have a very interesting graphic to show you that kind of puts into perspective just how much longer we have to go. Also, some information about home hardening in preparation of that storm and some possible grant money for the purpose of hardening your home. Also, going to cover some stuff about the market activity for Miami-Dade County that may be important to you. So let's get into it. All right, well, first of all, if a state or local government is going to be using state funds to construct anything within what's called the coastal building zone, they are going to have to conduct what is called a sea level impact study. Insurance Journal has voiced a little bit of consequence out of this, saying that they expect there to be helpful for insurers when determining any kind of flood risks, which obviously will have a oncoming effect for their clients whenever they are insuring their property close to coastal projects. So insurers may pass these costs on, of course, because they are being completely decimated by legal fees from an ongoing contractor fraud scheme that I have covered in the past. But they're also having a huge issue with their reinsurance rates. And so recently it was reported that they have seen increases here in Florida of up to 50% for their own reinsurance. Insurance companies have to have insurance purchased for the insurance that they give out. So, and even Citizens, the insurer of last resort here in Florida, they themselves were also having an issue with some reinsurance policies. So, regardless of all that, the powers that be here in Florida are still agreeing to raise premiums for these insurers. And why are they doing that? They're doing that because we are coming up on hurricane season and they want to make sure that we have enough funds in the Florida Hurricane Catastrophe Fund. It's very, very important. Why is that so important? Well, if you are new to Florida, especially South Florida, and you've never lived through a storm, hopefully, you're not going to be seeing this anytime soon, but I would suggest you talk to a native Miamian and kind of get the rundown for what it's like during a storm here. I'll take a moment here and specifically ask if you are a resident down here, if you live down here in South Florida, and you have not prepared for hurricane season, please make sure you do that now. Especially if you're a native, you should know essentially what it is you need, what your essentials are. If you're not a Miami native or you're just not familiar with what the essentials are, please speak to one of your longtime resident neighbors or speak to me, reach out to me, and I'm happy to share with you information on what you want to make sure you have in your preparedness kit, your hurricane preparedness kit ahead of the storm. And so take a look at this graph here. This is from NOAA and the National Weather Service, I believe, up in Tampa. And what this does is it very, very nicely illustrates just how early we are into the hurricane season. We still have about another month, probably about a month and a half to go before we should start expecting to see some serious storm activity, either from hurricane or tropical storms. And so, again, if you are not used to what that looks like down here in South Florida, it's not anything you want to play around with. If we're fortunate, we'll get maybe just a couple tropical storms, no big deal. But if we do face a more severe storm, a higher category storm, you are going to want to make sure that you are prepared for that. And so they want to make sure that you're prepared. And what they've done is they've exempted the sales tax for certain things to harden your home. Specifically, again, beginning on July 1st as well, so just a couple of days ago, there are some items that are exempted from sales tax. Again, if you're purchasing them for the hardening of your home, this is going to include impact resistant doors, impact resistant windows, and impact resistant garage doors. This is going to be separate from up to about $10,000 worth of grant money that is available for the hardening of your home. There are some details that surround that, so it's not going to be everybody that qualifies for that $10,000 grant. However, again, that is separate from the sales tax exemption that's going on. So you have sales tax exemption, and you have the possibility of up to $10,000 in hurricane hardening, home hardening grant money. So if you need information on that, definitely reach out to me, and I am happy to share with you where you find that information. All right, now let's take a look at the market activity. And so this chart is something that I put together. This is using data from the MLS. The MLS is our multiple listing service. This is what realtors, brokers, lots of real estate professionals use. It's a membership that we get with our local association, and it gives us the ability to list properties and use the MLS as kind of our entry point to the marketplace. And so not everything that happens in the real estate market is going to be not going to appear here on the MLS. However, the vast majority of it is definitely going to be on the MLS, and certainly enough to be able to identify some kind of a trend. And so what this is this year and last year, the first 6 months, January through June, these are the number of listings that were added to the MLS for sale and the number of listings that were added, that of those that were added that actually made it to closing. And so this is separated by month. So it's again the listings that were added within a certain period of time and the listings that were added within a certain period of time that actually made it to closing. Um, what's important to note here is that, well, first of all, not everything that comes to market makes it to closing. Properties expire, listings expire, they get withdrawn, they get canceled, they sit in a perpetual under contract stage. Things happen, so not everything that comes to market actually sells. However, there is a generally a pretty constant concentration of what does come for sale and that actually sells, and you'll see that constant kind of trending. And so, what's important to note about that concentration is that as less properties are closing compared to what's coming to market, you will start to see a building of inventory and you'll start to see some prices. You should expect to see some prices coming down because of a building of inventory. And the opposite is true as well. If you're starting to see more that is selling than what is coming to the market, like we've had for the last couple of years, you will see a depletion of inventory and you should start to expect to see prices to rise in that environment as well. So if you look at the line graphs here, yellow and gray, gray is what was added, yellow is what was closed. They remain relatively constant throughout the first 6 months of last year. However, taking a look at the bar charts now, the blue and the orange, what you'll see is that there's a tremendous divergent, especially starting around March, where a lot less properties that are coming to market are actually making it to closing. Now, May and June is a little bit misleading because in Miami-Dade County for single-family homes, there is about a almost 60-day lag between what comes to active and then what actually closes. Our median time to sale is what that's called. We're sitting at almost 60 days. So certainly not everything that was listed in May and not everything that was listed in June has had the opportunity to be exposed to the market long enough to actually make it to closing. So I'm sure that those two numbers are going to be adjusted at a later point. However, April, not so much. April, there's a significant drop off in April that was substantially more than what trend has been. Less than half of the properties that came to market in April were actually closed. So that there's something significant there. Why is that happening? Well, in March, on March 17th of 2022, the Federal Reserve they announced they actually implemented their very first rate hike. This is the target to their effective federal funds rate, and they raised it by 25 basis points by a quarter point. And so the reason they're doing this, they say, is that because they want to kind of reel in some of the inflation. Inflation had been running hot. They ran a ZIRP, a zero interest rate policy for all of, it feels like forever. And so there was a tremendous amount of dovishness in their policy. And so now they're trying to rein in some of the expected inflation or some of the believed inflation that is caused from that. And so right along time with that, what their effective federal funds rate does is it basically tightens or loosens monetary policy. It makes money easier or harder to find or to borrow. And so if money is easier to borrow, interest rates are lower, money is cheaper, life is good. If interest rates become a little bit tighter, if monetary policy becomes tighter, they become more what's called hawkish, then interest rates tend to rise because it becomes more cumbersome, more challenging, and more expensive to borrow money. And so what you'll see here is the 30-year mortgage. This is according to Freddie Mac. In March, the March low was sitting at about 3.76, and the June high was at about 5.81. And so there's a little bit over a 2% delta there, 2% difference in where rates were in March to where they were in June. So what that does is it definitely erodes a lot of buying power. And so you'll see a lot of pullback in the market from buyers because of that. Either some who just simply can't afford a higher mortgage, and so you definitely destroy real demand at that point. But it also does create a little bit of psychological turmoil, and it kind of scares buyers and causes some hesitation that may prevent them from pulling the trigger and moving forward on a transaction. So what this has done is it's led to more inventory. Of course, we're sitting at about inventory levels that we last saw in the beginning of 2021, in January 2021. We're sitting at about 3,300 single-family homes for sale in Miami-Dade County. All right. I think this is going to continue to go on for as long as the Federal Reserve is going to be watching, and they are going to be watching. They're going to be watching mainly two things: unemployment and price stability. Those are their two core mandates. Unemployment for them is going to be based on not only the concentration of employed unemployed in the workforce, but also the size of the labor force. There's two kind of key levers there. The size of the labor force makes a big difference, and then the number of that labor force is actually working is where they really come up with the meat potatoes of how they calculate the unemployment. So they're going to be watching that. They're going to be watching changes to pricing index like the CPI, and they're definitely going to be watching U.S. dollar liquidity. And so if they start to see inflation continuing to read high in their next meetings, then I would expect there to continue to rise rates, maybe at the same rate that they have been communicating that they're going to be rising at, half point, three-quarter point, maybe more, maybe less. But if they start to see unemployment start to build up too much, I expect them to kind of perhaps take a turnaround and start pulling in a little bit more dovish and being a little bit more dovish. And so, assuming, of course, that inflation is not running, inflation as they measure it is not continuing to run rampant. And then obviously, if they start to see some dollar liquidity problems, they're going to react. Who knows? Nobody has a crystal ball. And so it's really, really impossible. If anybody tells you what's going to happen, they're lying to you. That's why it's important to pray. All right, that's going to be it for this one. Thank you again to Ponce de Leon for coming to visit us over 500 years ago, half a million years ago. That is awesome. If you guys would like any more information on what I've covered here or anything regarding that grant, please let me know. I'll be happy to get that information to you. My name is Marvin Mora. I'm a broker associate down here in Miami, Florida. You guys stay safe. Take care. Bye bye.